Do you make any use of preliminary studies or sketches of any sort?
Yes, I do. I nearly always make a sketch.
Drawn or
I,
gouache or something?
I generally just make it out of with thin paint, and especially in portraits, I make a kind of outline of the position in which I want to try. I think I want to make the image, but after that, chance and well, chance and what I call accident takes over. And if anything ever does work in my case, it works from that moment when consciously I don't know what I'm doing.
When you say chance, you mean something more than improvisation. You mean as if you're really working without making conscious decisions.
They're certainly not conscious decisions.
But what are you thinking about? I mean, how do you suspend the operation of rational decisions?
I'm thinking of nothing but at that moment, I'm thinking of nothing but how hopeless and impossible this thing is to achieve. And by making these marks about which I don't know how they will behave, suddenly there comes something which your instinct seizes on as being for a moment the thing by which it could begin to develop.
How much does it help to have had a certain amount of drink when you're painting?
Well, this is a difficult thing to say. I haven't done many things when I have had a lot to drink, but I have one or two, and I did the the crucifixion in 1963.
Which was one of the best things.
And that was done when I was on drink for about a fortnight, and perhaps it was, sometimes it loosens you, and I think it works better, but it's, again, I don't, I think it also dulls other areas.
You really don't want to lose a certain clarity. You don't want to leave too much to chance, do you?
I want a very ordered image, but I want it to have come about by chance.
It's a matter of reconciling opposites, I suppose, of making the thing be contradictory things at once.
Well, isn't it that one wants a thing to be as factual as possible and at the same time as deeply suggestive or deeply unlocking of areas of sensation other than the simple illustration of the object that you set out to do? Isn't that what all art is about? If you think of the great Rembrandt self-portrait in Aix-en-Provence, for instance, and if you analyze it, you will see that there are hardly any sockets to the eyes. That it is almost completely anti-illustrational. And when the brutal, so-called brutal painting of a Jackson Pollock or something like that, I forget what that painting is called. What is the technical term for it?
Well, abstract expressionism.
Abstract expressionism, that of course all that had been done by Rembrandt in a painting like the self-portrait in Aix-en-Provence, but it had been done with the added thing that it was an attempt to record a fact, which was Rembrandt's own appearance. And to me, therefore, must be much more exciting and much more profound. Inevitably, he's trying to do something much more difficult.
You're very preoccupied with chance in painting. You're also preoccupied in chance with gambling.
The thing is that I do remember once when I lived once for a long time in Monte Carlo, and I became very obsessed by the casino, and I spent whole days there, and I used to think that I heard the croupiers calling out the numbers at roulette, the winning number, before the ball had fallen into the socket. And I used to go from table to table, and I remember one afternoon I went in there and I was playing on 3 different tables, and I heard these echoes, and I was playing rather small stakes, but at the end of that afternoon, chance had been very much on my side, and I ended up with about £1,600, the equivalent in francs, which was a lot of money for me then. Well, I immediately took a villa, and I stocked it with drink and all the food that I could buy in. But this chance didn't last very long, because in about 10 days' time I could hardly buy my fare out of the back to London from Monte Carlo. But it was a marvellous 10 days, and I had an enormous number of friends.
You don't think you're working in obsession with Christianity out of your system?
Well, I don't think so, because my common sense would not allow me to accept Christianity.
It might not allow you to accept it, but you're sure you've got rid of it?
Well, that one can never know, because one knows how very potent some of the images of Christianity have been, and how they must have played very deeply on one's sensibility. So one could never say that one's completely got away. And after all, without believing one believes in the ethics of Christianity, or a great number of them, without actually believing in the practice of the church.
When you do a crucifixion, I mean, you've done triptychs based on figures.
Yes.
And you've done these fairly complicated crucifixion images. What is the difference in the attitude of working when you start on a crucifixion?
Well, of course, you're working then about your own feelings and sensations, really. You might say it's almost like nearer to a self-portrait, that you are working on all sorts of very private feelings about behavior and about the way life is.
And the crucifixion is the armature for expressing it?
It is, yes.
You often involve the painting of sides of meat in your paintings of the crucifixion.
The subject of meat is such a marvellous subject matter, and of course naturally meat has enormous overtones to it. I've used photographs, and if you go into some of these great stores where you just go through these great halls of death, you can see meat and fish and birds and everything else all lying dead there. There have been extraordinary photographs which have been done of animals just being taken up before they were slaughtered. And I think these pictures were very much based on that kind of thing, which to me is very, very near this whole thing of the crucifixion. I know for religious people, for Christians, the crucifixion has a totally different significance. But as a non-believer, it has just an act of man's behavior, way of behavior to another. As man realizes that he is an accident and his futility, that he's a completely really futile being, that he has to play out the game without reason. I think that even when Velázquez was painting, even when Rembrandt was painting, in a peculiar way, they were still, whatever their attitude to life was, they were still slightly conditioned by certain types of religious possibilities, which man now, you could say, has been completely cancelled out for him. Now, of course, man can only attempt to make something very, very positive by trying to beguile himself for a time by the way he behaves, by prolonging possibly his life, by buying a kind of immortality through the doctors. You see, painting has now become, or all art has now become, completely a game by which man distracts himself. What is fascinating, actually, is that it's going to become much more difficult for the artist, because he must really deepen the game to be any good at all and return the onlooker to life more violently.